from Southern California. This is Mindset, mental health news and information. I'm your host, James Curtis. On today's show, raising kids can be tough. Sometimes you might need someone like this.
Hi, my name is Mercedes Samudio, LCSW, and I'm the founder and family coach at The Parenting Skill. I named my company The Parenting Skill because I believe that parenting is not an inherent trait that we're all born with, but I believe that's a skill that we all develop as we have our own children and as we interact with other children. What I do with my families and with my parents and my company is I focus on 1 to 2 behaviors at a time that parents are feeling is really kind of creating a lot of tension and dysfunction in their families. And I focus on giving the parents language to help them with their children's behavior, effective parenting skills, so that way they can continue to manage that behavior. And I also focus on the development of the parent-child relationship.
Today, my interview with parent and family coach Mercedes Samudio of The Parent Skill. But first, this news from our newly minted online newspaper, The Mindset Report. The Mindset Report available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. Today's Mindset Report is underwritten by Responsibility, a complete guide to bystander intervention by Alan Berkowitz, who is committed to the idea that the solution to health and social justice problems requires that we all engage as bystanders. More than 2,000 California mental health care workers for the HMO healthcare provider Kaiser Permanente recently went on a 7-day strike. As reported by National Public Radio, the strike, organized by the National Union of Healthcare Workers, claims Kaiser Permanente patients have been the victims of, quote, chronic failure to provide its members with timely, quality mental health care. Kaiser Permanente's John Nelson commented that the company delivers some of the highest quality mental health care in California and in the country, but he also added Kaiser Permanente wants to get better. In 2013, the state of California fined the HMO giant $4 million for problems like long wait times to see therapists. From health.com, depression is usually triggered by factors beyond our control, the death of a loved one, a job loss, or even financial troubles. But according to health.com, it's the small choices that we make every day that may also affect our mood more than we realize. The article lists what it calls the 12 worst habits for mental health. And among them are things that you might expect, like procrastination and not exercising. Also among them are those things that you might not expect, like slouching or taking pictures of everything all the time. From PsychCentral.com, clinical psychologist Jonas Webb discusses the number and quality of studies that show the amount of pure power of our brains, power that he describes as truly amazing. Among the studies findings that Dr. Webb cites, our brains can build muscle, increase metabolism, and drastically improve performance even on the most complex of tasks, just by thinking. And from Time Magazine, online at time.com, according to a new study, men and women are more likely to make a healthy change if their partner does also. Researchers looked at data from 3,722 couples who were either married or living together who were part of a study on aging. They found that when one partner made a healthy change like quitting smoking, weight loss, or increased exercise, their partner was more likely to make the same change. For more on these and other mental health stories, visit The Mindset Report at mindsetreport.com. We're back with our main story, parenting skills, in 60 seconds. Welcome back to Mindset, Mental Health News and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. You can find us on the web at mindsetshow.com, on Facebook at Mindset Show page, or on Twitter with the handle at Mindset Show. My guest today, licensed clinical social worker Mercedes Samudio. She's a parent coach, and you can find her at theparentskill.com on the web. And as you heard before the break, Mercedes Samudio has an intensity and a passion that I think is simply empowering all on its own. Nonetheless, I asked Mercedes Samudio to describe her overall approach for coaching parents, and what impressed me about what she has to say was that it was straightforward and a no-nonsense type approach.
I do look at how we're raising our children. My larger framework is that we're raising another human being, and we're raising another human being to be able to take care of themselves and to advocate for themselves once they're no longer under our care. So I use that framework a lot of the time. And then I also look at the relationship between the parent and the child as the foundation for everything else that we put on the child or on the family. When we look at our relationships, like our coworkers, our spouses, our significant others, our friends, they all kind of have a foundation for what we can do with them and what we can't do with them. So like with our bosses, we know that we probably can't go to a nightclub and get drunk with our bosses, right? We still have a relationship with them, but there's a certain level or a certain foundation that we have with them. I feel like the parent-child relationship has those same foundations and those same limits and boundaries. And I think that once you figure out what your relationship is with your child, then you know the things that you can do with them, the things that maybe won't be so effective with them, and the things that will really kind of help flourish them as a human being.
So one of the things that I was interested in is how coaching is different from, say, traditional counseling or therapy. Here's what Mercedes had to say.
So what I do with families, like I said, is coaching. So coaching in itself is more directive. It's less focused on the past issues and more focused on the present issues with the family and how those present issues are going to affect the future of that family.
And here are the mechanics of how Mercedes Samudio actually does her coaching process.
So what families do is they call me. We schedule a free parent power session, which is like that free introductory session where I get a good overview of what is going on in the home and what some of the major issues are occurring in the home to kind of create all the tension that initially led the family to or the parent to call me. Once we establish what the main issues are, and again, I like to focus on 1 to 2 initially, and initially those are the most dysfunctional issues that are going on. So the kid is hitting, the kid is biting, the kid may be experimenting or doing drugs, just things that are really huge in the family that are creating a lot of tension I like to focus on initially. And we talk about a number of sessions, that we can really work on this behavior solely and not focus on everything else. Just really focus on what's going on in the family, what's going on for the child as these behaviors are manifesting, what's going on for the parent as they're watching their child experience these behaviors, and really get a good sense of how the family can help that child decrease those behaviors.
So to get my mind around what a coaching session with Mercedes might actually be like, I talked about my hypothetical 10-year-old daughter. In my hypothetical, my 10-year-old had taken a piece of candy while we were in the grocery store, and I added that my solution was to, 1, get her to admit what she did right away, right there on the spot, an apology to the store manager, followed by the sternest lecture I could muster. I asked Mercedes to give me some feedback on how she thought I handled it and how I might improve.
What I would start off with was saying that I really actually think that you did a pretty good job at dealing with the initial idea of stealing. So the initial thing was her stealing a piece of candy, which, again, I think you dealt with it in a really effective way. You took her to say sorry back to the store manager. You made her take the candy back. You explained to her some of the consequences of stealing. You explained to her why you do what you do as a prosecutor, which I think helps a little bit, like you said, going into her morality and helping her to understand right versus wrong. The issue, I think, where some of that break might have come in for her doing maybe another time was helping her to understand what her motivations were for stealing in the first place. So stealing for a lot of children is this idea that I need something that my parent or my caregiver is not going to get for me, so I'm going to get it myself. Most kids don't understand long-term consequences. So what you initially did, giving her the idea of those long-term consequences, was stored in her wonderful little logical brain, but it wasn't in her emotional part where I want what I want when I see it. So I think what I would say for the long term for you is maybe helping to understand, maybe you getting a really good understanding of what her motivations are for stealing. What is that deep need that she's having for these things that she has stolen in the past and things that she may steal in the future? Because as she gets older, she's going to want clothes and she's going to want makeup and she's going to want, X or Y. And stealing, if we're being really honest between ourselves, is not that hard. She can get those things. So it's not going to be about the long term, you're going to get caught, because what if she does it 4 or 5 more times and doesn't get caught? What if she gets really good at hiding how she steals and doesn't get caught? So that kind of, again, going back to the long-term consequences for her, it won't resonate so much. But what will resonate is you understanding her motivation for needing those things right at the moment she sees them. Right when I saw that candy, I got it. I needed it. Right when I saw that $2 bill, I grabbed it. I needed it. So I think what I would like to work with you on maybe is talking through and helping you learn how to talk to your daughter about what her motivations are. When she sees X or Y, what's her initial thought? Why do you need it then? What are you going to do with it once you get it? And then even walk her through how is she going to get it. So you see a dress on the rack. Well, they have those little ink things on them. How are you going to get it? How are you going to get it out the store? Talking to her through that whole thought process will give you, Dad, a lot of insight into what your daughter is thinking and what her motivations are.
Now, Mercedes tells me also that if this had been an actual family she was trying to help with this type of situation, she would have started the process off like this.
I'd like to talk to the parent first, just to really get some good understanding of what's going on in the family, what's going on, how things are working, all of that.
And here are some of the questions Mercedes would have for me or this hypothetical family in real life.
For a real in-depth, let's work through this solution, a little bit about the family makeup. So who else is a caregiver? Who else is in the home? Who mainly comes up with the disciplinary rules of the house? And how old is your daughter now? Who does she go to when she feels like she's messed up? If she wants to apologize, or if she's like, I know I'm going to get in trouble for that, let me go and tell somebody before they find me out. And then who does she normally go to when she wants something, anything? Go to the movie, go to the park, get some candy, get some clothes. And then my last question is, does she tell the truth when she's caught? So when you catch her doing X, you told her to go to bed and then you catch her and she's like, I was already asleep, I don't know what happened. Or if you catch her in any kind of lie, does she say, okay, you're right, Dad, I did say that.
And after all of those responses, Mercedes then designs the plan.
So what I would say is 2 things that I'm hearing and I'm thinking in terms of what we can do for the treatment plan, what we can do to kind of help decrease maybe the stealing behavior that we're seeing, is to create a united front for your daughter, where she knows that both of you know what's going on at the same time. What that'll do for her is it'll help her when she does want something, not to come to either of you, but to get you both together so she can present what she wants to both of you at the same time. The way to do that is if she comes to you, Dad, she says, Dad, I was just watching TV and this doll came up and I have to have it. Come real quick, Dad, come, it's on TV right now. So you come, you see the doll, you take a pen, jot it down and say, okay, well, Mom is going to be home in, I think, about 10 minutes, because she usually gets off at X time. So when Mom gets home, let's both of us sit down and talk to her about this doll that you want. So Mom gets home, you tell, Mom that she brought to you this idea that she wanted this doll, and you let her tell you both why she should get this doll. Let her go to whatever she said. Mom, I've been really good. I made it my bed. Dad, last week when you had to take out the trash, I did it. So I think that warrants me getting the doll. Then both of you will say, you know what, we've listened to you and we really appreciate you giving us all of this time, all these things to think about. Mom and Dad are going to talk about it. We'll let you know tomorrow morning what we think.
In my reaction, that seems like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Let me tell you why it's a lot of work and why you should do it, why this is going to help with you and your family. You guys have an only child, so she doesn't really have another sibling to kind of co-conspire with. So a lot of her decisions that she makes are going to be on her own, which if we go back to what I initially talked about, getting into her motivations for stealing, she comes up with those ideas on her own. So she's going to really need you guys to give her some space to explore, why do I even want this thing? Why do I even want this? Why do I need this piece of candy right now? Why do I even want this? It's also going to help you lay the foundation for delayed gratification. Learning that just because I want something, I don't get it right away. So going back to the little strategy that I just said to you, that works when she comes to you for something that's on TV or that she just heard about. Now, what happens when she sees something right in the moment, right? You're at the store and she sees this candy or this thing that she actually wants. It'll actually have set the foundation for you to say just that again. So I'll say, Jane, how do we normally make decisions? And she'll stand there. Well, we normally wait till we talk to Mom. I was like, yeah, we do. But I want this candy now. I was like, but is Mom here right now to help us make this decision? And it kind of allows her to, again, go back to that delayed gratification. I can't have everything right away. I have to wait for it. So that goes back to a little bit of how I feel about why I really believe that you're not raising a kid, you're raising a human. So kids are impulsive because they're in a developmental pace in their lives where that's kind of part of what they're doing. They're learning about their environment. They're learning how to get their needs met in their environment, right? But here's the coolness about you being the adult. You've already passed that stage in your life where impulsivity was a part of your everyday being. You're not doing that anymore. So it kind of is one of your tasks or one of your roles as a parent to help your child learn that delayed gratification. So delayed gratification isn't about introspection. It's about helping that child kind of sit through, I can't have what I want right when I get it. And you do that by creating a few different things like decision-making processes or how do we get things that we want, which then we get into like chores or earning things, those different things like that. So that way that child learns, right when I want something, I don't get it right away. Once you set that foundation, actually, then you can start putting layers on it, and that's something that you do as a parent. You can start saying, well, you know what, if we're in the store and you want a piece of candy, that might be something that we can make a decision on right then. But if you see something on TV that you want, that might have to be something that me and Mom talk about. But you can't get there until you set the foundation for what that child understands about delayed gratification. The idea of creating patterns, creating habits, practice, because essentially, again, go back to the main idea. I am raising another human. I'm not raising a child, right? I'm raising a human. This human, your 10-year-old, is going to be 11, and then she's going to be 12, and then she's going to be 15, then she's going to be 18. If she gets to be 18 and doesn't know what it means to wait to get what she needs, the candy stealing is going to become something bigger, other things that she might steal. You get what I'm saying? But you have to set that foundation today at 10 where the things that she's stealing are pretty minor, not so hard to kind of, if you have to repay it or if you have to give it back, it's not going to be, a criminal activity thing. So setting these patterns of how do I teach my child delayed gratification?
And what no parent, no dad at least, wants to think about their little girl growing up into young adulthood. But okay, so now that the plan is developed, I'm thinking that the next step is to talk to the child, right? Yeah, no. Our expert parent coach, Mercedes Samudio, says that this is the next step.
So go home and practice a little bit of what we talked about, the decision-making with you and your wife, helping her to learn how to do that, and actually have you tell me over the phone over the next week or so how that worked for you. Because that's actually going to tell me if I need her to come in or not. I like the parents to feel more empowered than for me to do the work. So I'm not going to tell your kid that they shouldn't steal. I'm not the parent. At the end of the day, the reason why I give parents all of the skills and the techniques is because you're going to be the one to take that technique and teach your child that. And as we talk from week to week, you'll say, you know what, Mercedes, I tried it, didn't work out. My kid stole 5 more times this week. Or you'll say, you know what, she only stole once again this week. And then the next time we talked to her, she said she actually came to me and didn't steal. She asked me first. So that's kind of how I like to do it. Because when we bring the kid in, once we do bring the kid in, I like you to kind of have some kind of results for me. Don't bring the kid in saying we've never tried it yet, because then I'm kind of just like, well, I'm not going to enforce this rule. I'm not at the house with you. I can sit here and talk to your kid all day. I'm not the mom. I'm not the dad.
But what about the idea of pushback from the parents? Parents, don't they still, I was wondering, and I wondered this out loud to Mercedes, still want you to talk to the kids?
At the end of the day, the caregiver, right, parent, is who your child is going to look to, regardless of what they say. You have to be the one to kind of hold that line for them, not because you're at fault, but because you're going to be that kind of guiding force for them. You're their guide. You're going to be teaching them how to kind of navigate this wonderfully winding road that we call life. So as you do that, right, and as you get really comfortable doing that, you don't feel like you're at fault so much. You feel like, okay, yes, I have this responsibility. Yes, I'm the guide. And as I learn how to do that more comfortably and, here's my key word, more effectively, then you actually don't feel like you're at fault anymore. I won't say that this is for every parent, but I think a lot of times it comes from this idea that I'm going to mess my kid up, right? So I don't want to step on this crack and this crack reverberate for my child's whole life. You know, you made a statement a little bit earlier where it's like, oh, I probably traumatized her by making that decision, because that's that fear. Oh, did I traumatize my kid? Did I make them this way? Right? That's the more internal kind of dialogue. And then if you look at society, what happens when kids do bad? Who gets in trouble? Does the kid get in trouble? Or do we look at the parents and say, where was the parent at when that kid shut up that school? Where was the parent at, when that kid was doing drugs? So there's this huge societal fear that it's the parent's fault if the children doesn't do what they're supposed to do. And I think a lot of times parents internalize that. If I don't spank my kids, then they're going to be bad, If I don't punish my kids, then they're going to be bad and I'm going to get in trouble for it. So I want to kind of change it around for parents. It's not about fault. It's about you being a guide for your child. You need to let go of that. And it's going to be hard because we're human, right? When we get judged or critiqued, it hurts. So even if you're not a parent, anytime someone judges you or tells you what they think about what you're doing, you get a little upset. So the same thing happens with parents. And I think parents sometimes take it on a little bit too much. But I think going back to one of my main foundations and my main focuses is that parent-child relationship. No matter what everybody else is doing around you, what does my relationship look like with my child? Because that's going to mean way more for that discipline and for that relationship than what grandma thinks when she comes over for Thanksgiving or what cousin thinks when we take her to the birthday party next weekend. Those people have their right to think what they think about your parenting, but what really matters is, what does my child think about what I'm doing? What do I personally think about what I'm doing? That should be your foundation and your springboard for making that decision about what you're doing with your child.
And that indeed was one of the things that I absolutely loved about my conversation with Mercedes Samudio of The Parenting Skill. If you just joined us, you're listening to Mindset, Mental Health News, and Information. I'm your host, James Curtis. We're talking about raising kids. My guest today, Mercedes Samudio. You can find her online at theparentingskill.com. And as I said a moment ago, what I loved about my conversation with Mercedes was that she's not trying to be in your life as a parent coach forever, really for any extended period of time. And in fact, as you hear her talking about how she addresses the requests of parents to talk to the kid, to their child, she may not and really would rather not even talk to the child at all.
We can talk to the child if I'm noticing that the child is having, as we talk and you tell me what's going on, what the barriers are, that gives me insight into knowing what we should try next. So if the barrier is you didn't even try this week, then I don't need to talk to the kid yet, right? If the barrier is you tried and your child had a huge meltdown, they just fell out. How dare you change up my life and how I get things from you? Then, yeah, I want to see the child. I want to see how that child interacts with you. I want to look at when you say jump, do they jump or they say how high? If I give you a strategy and it starts to work, again, process, things take time as you change things in your family. So I let parents know that as well, that you might meet with me this week, and I'm going to tell you right now that between this week and next week, your child's not going to become an angel. All those behaviors will not go away. So bear with yourself and give yourself some space to fail, not do so great, But let's just say after a few sessions, things are starting to change. You're starting to see this decrease in the behavior. There's really no need for me to be in the home. There's no need for me to see your kid because you actually are starting to master and be effective at decreasing those behaviors on your own. You're becoming really effective at being the guide for your home.
So after you go through the coaching process with someone like Mercedes Samudio, I still wondered whether or not parents, with all of the guidance, all of the coaching, all of her directives about trying to empower the parents, still wanted the coach, the parent coach, Mercedes Samudio, to talk to their kids, or were they grateful and ready to cut their ties with this parent coach and move on?
I've gotten people to tell me, you know what, thanks, I don't need you anymore, bye, which is great, and I always want to check in and make sure, they understand why, they're done and what progress they've made. But for the parents who tell me they still want to talk to my child, then it becomes this kind of discussion about what is it that you would like for me to say? What do you really want me to say to your child? When I see your child, what do you want me to say? Usually I get parents staring at me blankly because they really don't know what they want me to say. So then I turn it back on them and I said, if you had the opportunity to tell your kid anything you wanted to tell them and you knew they would listen and you knew they wouldn't curse you out or slam the door or run away from home, what would you say? And then once I get that response, that tells me a lot about why they want me to talk to their kid. So I've gotten responses to, I just wish you would stop being so much like your dad, or, I just wish you would do everything I said. And those type of responses let me know why you're still having such a hard time. Even though there's been change, why are you still having such a hard time with your kid? Again, lots of things give me insight. I give you this, you give me something, gives me insight. I give you this, you give me something else, gives me insight. That's the whole process. Once we decrease that behavior, then we start to see what some of those underlying truths are about the family. So once I get that out of the way, get that child to stop tantruming or get that child to stop, arguing back so much or stealing, then you start to see what's really going on for mommy, for daddy, for sister, for brother, what's really going on in this family.
A parenting coach can fix a lot of family issues. Mercedes Samudio, an outstanding approach, an effective approach, but sometimes it just can't fix everything. There are other things that need a different tact.
So if the issues seem to be more of like a family, we just don't know how to communicate thing, that's within my scope, and I feel really good doing that. But if it seems like this is something from mom's past, where mom has just had this trauma in her own life, and her child's behavior is triggering that, then I definitely refer the mom out for her own therapy so she can get some insight into why what her child is doing is triggering her so much and she can't let that go. I had a recent issue where a child did something that was pretty sexually suggestive, but it was more a symptom of him developing his sexuality. So once we uncovered that and we reduced some of those behaviors, mom finally said, well, I got so upset because I had sexual trauma in my life, and this was just me and her talking, and I referred her out, and I said, it's going to be really important that you understand where your sexual trauma ends and where your child's sexual development begins, because if you don't, then you're going to really impede your child becoming an adult and learning what it means to be sexually active and learning what it means to be sexually responsible, because you're not going to be able to have those conversations.
Mercedes Samudio, LCSW, licensed clinical social worker. You can find her on the web at theparentingskill.com. She is indeed, every time I spoke with her, which has been multiple times, as fabulous as she sounded in that interview. She's located in Southern California, but she might even be able to help you over the phone or Skype. Give her a call, check her out, see what she has to say. Thank you so much to my guest, Mercedes Samudio. You can find links for all of the information that you heard about on today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Mindset Show page, and on our newly designed mindsetshow.com website. And as always, we tweet with the handle at Mindset Show. Next week, I also have a conversation with Duke University professor Kenneth Dodge about a program decades in the making that could prevent sexual assault among future generations of college students. We've all heard in the news lately a lot about reports about fraternities and sanctions and on-campus sexual violence. This show, if you're interested in any of those topics, is something you will not want to miss. For Mindset, mental health news and information, I'm your host, James Curtis. Dare to see mental health differently and pass it on.